Imagine standing in the sweltering heat of first-century Jerusalem, the dust of the streets mixing with the metallic smell of Roman armor and the sweet incense from the temple. Imagine holding absolute power over a volatile city, constantly balancing the demands of a paranoid emperor in Rome and the restless religious leaders at home. This was the razor's edge walked by Herod Agrippa I. He was not his grandfather, the paranoid builder who slaughtered the innocents. He was not his uncle, the weak ruler who beheaded John the Baptist. Agrippa was something far more dangerous. He was a charismatic politician, a master of crowds. In the year 44 AD, the political climate in Judea was suffocating. Agrippa knew that to keep his throne, he did not just need the backing of Roman swords, he needed the adoration of the Jewish elite. And he noticed a growing irritation among the traditionalists. A new sect was expanding. A group of fishermen, tax collectors, and women who endlessly proclaimed that a crucified rabbi had risen from the dead. The early Christians lived under constant persecution. The book of Acts narrates how Herod killed James and arrested Peter. It was a calculated move, a political sacrifice offered to a bloodthirsty gallery. Agrippa did not hate James. In the cold calculus of absolute power, James was simply a highly visible target, a pawn to be removed to buy political capital. The execution was swift, brutal, and effective. The crowds cheered. The traditionalists approved. And Agrippa felt the intoxicating surge of popularity. He tasted the dangerous nectar of public worship. It was a strategy of blood and applause. But the applause of men is a volatile drug. It demands a constantly escalating dosage. Seeing that the death of James pleased the masses, he ordered the arrest of Peter, the very pillar of this new movement. He chained him between soldiers, planning a public execution after the Passover. Agrippa believed he was the undisputed master of life and death. He was entirely wrong. Imagine locking your greatest political prize behind solid iron doors, guarded by 4 squads of elite soldiers, only to wake up and find the cell perfectly intact, the chains unbroken, and the prisoner entirely gone. What does a mortal king do when his absolute power is silently mocked by an invisible force? This was the suffocating, terrifying reality Herod Agrippa woke up to on the very morning he had carefully planned to execute the Apostle Peter. The cold, damp stone walls of the Jerusalem prison held absolutely no answers. Peter had been chained securely between 2 hardened guards, a strict Roman protocol reserved for high-value targets, ensuring that even the slightest movement would immediately wake the captors. Yet, the biblical narrative in the book of Acts describes an angelic intervention so quiet, so deeply surreal, that Peter himself believed he was merely experiencing a vision. As the heavy iron gates swung open on their own accord, the fragile, carefully constructed illusion of Agrippa's supreme control completely shattered. When dawn broke over the city, the panic inside the fortress was visceral. The frantic, metallic clanking of armor echoed through the dark corridors as guards desperately searched for the Galilean fishermen who had vanished into thin air. For Agrippa, this was not just a logistical failure. It was a devastating, irreversible public humiliation. In the ruthless, unforgiving theater of first-century Middle Eastern politics, a monarch who cannot secure his own dungeon is a monarch whose throne is immediately vulnerable to rebellion. His reaction was swift, merciless, and driven by pure, unadulterated paranoia. He cross-examined the terrified guards, desperately searching for a conspiracy, a hidden bribe, or anything logical to explain the completely impossible. Finding absolutely nothing, he ordered their immediate execution. It was a desperate, bloody attempt to mask his sudden, glaring impotence. Humiliated and seeking to aggressively reclaim his shattered ego, Agrippa abruptly left Jerusalem. He traveled down to the coastal stronghold of Caesarea, hoping to escape the whispering crowds and reinforce his supremacy. But Caesarea would not be his safe sanctuary. It would be his graveyard. Imagine stepping into the magnificent amphitheater of Caesarea Maritima, the salty breeze from the Mediterranean Sea mingling with the heavy scent of roasted meat and pagan incense. It is the year 44 AD. Agrippa is hosting a massive festival in honor of Emperor Claudius. After the deeply humiliating escape of Peter in Jerusalem, this is his calculated, desperate power play. He needs to remind the ancient world exactly who holds the sword. Flavio Josephus, the meticulous first-century Roman Jewish historian, provides a chilling, eyewitness-level account of this exact day. He records that on the second day of the festival, Agrippa entered the theater at the break of dawn. He was not wearing ordinary royal robes. He was dressed in a spectacular garment made entirely of woven silver threads. As the first piercing rays of the morning sun struck the metal, the king literally shone. He radiated a blinding, almost supernatural light across the crowded arena. To the political delegates from Tyre and Sidon, who were there desperately begging for vital food supplies and economic favor, this was the perfect moment to flatter a fragile, dangerous ego. They needed his grain. He needed their absolute submission. When Agrippa stood and delivered his public oration, his voice echoed against the perfect stone acoustics. The crowd, driven by pure political calculation, began to chant loudly. It is the voice of a god and not of a mortal. What does a man do when offered the throne of the divine? A grounded ruler, remembering the jealous God of his ancestors, would have torn his garments in absolute horror. He would have instantly silenced the blasphemy. But Agrippa was starving for validation. His supreme authority had just been mocked by an empty prison cell in Judea. Now, he drank the toxic adulation like a man dying of thirst. He silently accepted the worship, willingly elevating himself above his own human frailty. But in the unseen realms, a definitive verdict was instantly finalized. Both the Book of Acts and the historical records of Josephus perfectly align on the terrifying timeline of what happened next. Imagine the exact moment the deafening cheers turn into a paralyzed, terrified silence. The massive crowd is still chanting, "A god, a god," when Agrippa's expression suddenly freezes in sheer terror. According to the meticulous records of Flavius Josephus, the king looked up and saw an owl perched on a rope above his head. For Agrippa, this was not just a bird, it was a dark, familiar omen from his past predicting his imminent doom. But the biblical account in the Book of Acts pierces the veil of the physical world to reveal the true, unseen cause. It simply states, "Immediately an angel of the Lord struck him down because he did not give God the glory." The devastating transition from a proclaimed deity to a helpless, broken mortal took only a few seconds. A sudden, blinding agony tore through his abdomen. The powerful man who had just accepted the breathless worship of thousands collapsed right there, still wearing his shimmering, woven silver robes. The magnificent theater instantly descended into absolute chaos. The same political delegates who, moments ago, declared him immortal, now watched in pale horror as he was frantically carried out by his royal guards. For 5 agonizing days, the king suffered excruciating pain in his opulent palace at Caesarea. The fresh, salty sea breeze could not mask the heavy smell of his physical decay. Modern medical historians suggest he might have suffered from a ruptured cyst, acute appendicitis, or a severe parasitic infection, as the Book of Acts vividly and terrifyingly describes that he was eaten by worms. But the clinical diagnosis is entirely secondary to the profound theological irony. The untouchable king who had freely executed the Apostle James, the arrogant ruler who had locked Peter in heavy Roman chains, was now being slowly devoured from the inside out. All the swords in Judea, all the wealth of his kingdom, could not stop this microscopic, divine judgment. Agrippa's public, gruesome decay was a cosmic statement. It was the ultimate proof that the throne of the universe is never shared. The king was dead, but the movement he tried to destroy was unstoppable. Imagine the terrifying silence of the early church as they heard the news coming from Caesarea. That relentless king, who had hunted the apostles like common criminals, the one who had shed the blood of James and chained Peter in dungeons, had not been defeated by an army with swords, nor by a political decree from Rome. He had collapsed under the suffocating weight of his own arrogance. The public, prolonged, and grotesque death of Herod Agrippa was not just a macabre historical event recorded by Flavio Josephus. It was an undeniable demonstration, exposed to the entire ancient world, that human power, no matter how absolute it seems, is incredibly fragile. Agrippa tried to build his legacy on calculated persecution, vanity, and the toxic applause of the crowds. But while disease consumed him before the elite of his time, the book of Acts records a breathtaking contrast in the very next verse. But the word of God grew and multiplied. The theological irony crafted in this moment is absolutely perfect. The monarch who accepted being worshipped as an immortal God was destroyed from the inside out, while the message of that carpenter he tried to annihilate spread like an unstoppable fire throughout the Roman Empire, changing history forever. The tragic fall of Herod Agrippa confronts us with an uncomfortable truth. Today, we may not wear silver robes, but we are still seduced by the altar of public approval. We build our own kingdoms on social media, in our careers, and in our ambitions, intoxicating ourselves with the constant validation of others. We forget that pride is not a simple flaw. It is a spiritual disease that silently erodes us from within. The greatest danger we face is not failure, but intoxicating success without humility. It is the belief that we are the untouchable masters of our own destiny,